Right, my Chinese Mini Lathe has developed a fault, and it's the potentiometer, or the speed controller, is working to turn the speed up, but the actual switch is broken on it. Now this particular model is an Amadil lathe, and it has a K.B Electronics Circuit Board, which was made in the USA. And on this model, the potentiometer works by turning clockwise to get the maximum revs, and fully anti-clockwise for the minimum revs, and it should click, and that operates the switch on the back. Now, when I first bought this lathe and first had this problem, I actually thought that the potentiometer, when it clicks, is actually turning the spindle off. But it's not. What it does when it clicks, it actually closes the contacts on the switch and resets the electronic circuit board, and this allows you to change the direction of the spindle. So it's a bit of a safety device to actually stop you from changing the direction of the spindle while the spindle is running. I've had the lathe about 6 years now, and I've had probably about 4 of these potentiometers in that time. So it's a weak component and they don't last that long. And it's normally the switch inside the potentiometer that breaks first. It's very flimsy. And when my last one broke, the switch broke in the open position, so there was no contact. So I could turn the lathe on like that, but when I turned it into reverse, it wouldn't go in the reverse position. So this time it has broken in the closed position, where the contacts are making contact. And I can show you that now, and I'll only do it in very low revs just to show you so it won't damage the lathe, but I can turn the direction of the spindle and it'll work without having to turn the actual spindle off. And it shouldn't do that. So in this video I'm going to show you the method that I use to actually change the potentiometer. So the first and most vital thing to do is to actually remove the power socket to the lathe, and I have it hanging over the front here so I know that it's off, and just test the switch, and then I know that I'm safe. So now I can remove the electronic circuit box. Before I do that, I'd just like to show you this guard I've made out of Lexan polycarbonate. Cut out a section like that, and that part there just goes in between the emergency switch and the back there, and just sits on the top, and it protects the rev counter gauge from getting scratched by swarf or whatever. So that's another nice little project to make for the lathe. Now the box is held on by 4 screws, 2 top and 2 on the underside. So I've removed all the screws, pull the box forward and support it carefully, and there's a couple of screws in this plastic guard which you can remove to pull that back. Mine's broken off, so I can just do that anyway. And on the emergency stop switch, remember the 2 colours, darker blue at the top and light blue on the bottom on this side, on the right hand side, and pull each of those off. What I do when I'm doing a job like this, in various stages, so I can remember where everything goes. I actually take pictures on my phone or digital camera, so I don't actually forget anything. And I also write down the wiring details in a notebook. The next two cables to remove are the ones down the bottom of the circuit board, and they are the speed controller plug that pulls off. Don't worry about reconnection because they can only go on one way, and the main power one, which is a green plug at the back of this circuit board at the bottom, and that one can only go on one way. And then the whole box comes off and you can actually do the work on the bench. So you just take out all the screws that hold this flimsy plastic guard on the back, and then you're into the electronics. You can buy the potentiometers from Amideal. I've noticed that they seem to do two different types. In the past when I've bought them, they've always had the flat on them for the adjusting knob, and on the new one they've just sent me, it's got a splined shaft, but that doesn't matter because you can just put another knob on that one. I haven't found anywhere else to buy these particular potentiometers. They seem to be a unique design, and like I say, when the switch is activated in the minimum position, the contacts are actually closed, so it's made contact through those two poles. On a normal potentiometer, when you turn it to the minimum position and the switch clicks, the contacts are open, so it's effectively turned a machine off. But like I said earlier, these ones are basically resetting the circuit board so that you can change the direction of the spindle. Now the potentiometer is in here, so it's quite easy to get at, and there's two cables on the back for the switch and three white cables on mine, which is to the actual contacts on the potentiometer, and they connect onto the circuit board in a position called P1, P2 and P3. And before I pull any of those wires off the circuit board, if you do it that way, you can actually leave them on the circuit board and just resolder a new potentiometer onto them. Before I take them off, I put a little sticker on them, fold over sticker, a paper one, and mark them up with their marking of P1, P2 and P3. And you can see those there. So rather than disturb anything and pull these off, I'll take the potentiometer off. So you take the plastic knob off at the front with an Allen key, remove the locking nut, and the washer, and push the potentiometer through. And there's a plastic cover on there which helps with the insulation, and you can see there the white P1, P2, P3 wires and the switch mechanism wires on the back. Now when you come to change one of these, if you've never changed one before, the wires will have heat shrink on this area here to cover the solder, but because I've changed this one before, I've put black tape around them. I'll remove that. So then I just hold the potentiometer with the shaft facing me, and I look at the connections carefully and see where those wires that I've marked are connected. The P1, the P2 and the P3. And I make a careful note of that, where they're actually connected onto the potentiometer. So like I say, it's best to have stickers on here, otherwise you have to keep looking closely at the circuit board. It's clearly marked on there, P1, P2 and 3, but like I say, this makes it much easier. But to make it clear for everyone, with the potentiometer shaft facing me, P1 goes here on the right hand side, P2 goes in the middle, and P3 is on the left hand side. And then turning the potentiometer around to see the back, you have two wires on the back. Mine are red and yellow, and this is for the switch terminal inside. It doesn't matter which contact these go on, they could be round the other way. All as those wires are for is when the switch makes contact, it bridges those two wires and the wires are connected, and that's what resets the circuit board. So now I'm going to just check this new potentiometer to see that I've been given the right one. And I do that with my multimeter and switch it to 20k. The potentiometer is rated at 4.7 ohms, so it's 4B4K7, and you can test that by putting a terminal on one of the outer ones. Just connect that one up to the red on the multimeter, and the black one connect to the middle one, which is the wiper of the potentiometer, and put that on the black tester, and that should read about 4.7. Mine's 4.89, that's near enough. And you can see that it's working when you turn the potentiometer up. It's 0, back down again, 4.89. So that's the correct ohms. And then put the tester on the back of the switch, make contact there, and you can see in the fully off position it reads 0, so those contacts, they've made contact. When you turn the potentiometer clockwise, you get the full reading, so that is open. The contact is open on there and there's no circuit through it. Contact in the off position, no contact in the on position. And just to show you the difference, I've got what I call a normal potentiometer here with a switch on the back, and to show you that it's completely opposite, put the tester on the back switch. When you turn that one fully counterclockwise, it's off, there's no contact at all, and then when you turn it on, there's full contact. Off, on. So if you want the Lathe to work exactly how it was made for them, you have to buy the potentiometer from them. It seems to be a unique design. But having said that, if you're fed up with actually buying these potentiometers at £10 a time and they keep breaking down, you can actually buy probably 5 of the ordinary ones from China for less than the price of this one. And you can rig the ordinary one up on the lathe by connecting P1, P2 and P3 in their normal position, but don't connect the 2 wires on the back. Instead of connecting the wires to these terminals on the back, you connect the red and the yellow, like I have on my one, to an ordinary on-off switch, preferably one that would actually spring back on its own. And when you operate the machine with a switch connected like that, when you want to change the spindle direction, you just turn the potentiometer to the minimum position, flick the switch, and you can change the direction of the spindle, and then it'll work as normal. But if you want to change the spindle direction and you come to turning it to minimum and you don't flick the switch, when you go to turn the potentiometer on again, the spindle won't start. You must first flick the switch first, and that resets the circuit board and allows the spindle to start after changing its direction. And I did have one of these switches on mine. I drilled a hole in the side here and mounted the switch in there, and I did run it for a long time like that, but I did get fed up with having to switch this switch every time I changed the spindle direction, so I went back to the actual Amadeal one. But I think I'll go back to this method if this new one here doesn't last long. So a good way to do the soldering is put the new potentiometer into a vise like this, held on the shaft. So you've got it in the same sort of position as the old one, and then you can desolder each wire at a time and resolder it onto the connection on the new one. And before I start, I just put a little bit of flux on each terminal. So desolder P1 like that, and resolder that onto the new one. Like that. I've put this potentiometer into a heavy clip there, or you can put a little vise on that one just to give yourself a bit of weight, so you can pull the wires off as you desolder them. So desolder P2, which is the middle one. Just put a bit of solder on my iron and resolder that onto the new middle one. So P2 goes in the middle. So that's that one done. And desolder P3. Incidentally, the P3 one has 2 cables on it. And put a bit of solder on. And that's that one done. Now desolder the wire on the back. yellow one first. And like I say, it doesn't matter which terminal that one goes on to. That's that one done. And then the red one. Just put a bit more solder on my iron. And that's the job done there. So next I just cover the P1, P2 and P3 solders with a bit of tape, just a short piece of tape, and cover that up like that, and that stops anything from making contact with it. So that's all the soldering done, and it's ready to go back in to the circuit box. So just before I put the potentiometer back into the box, you'll see that on the top, or on the front face, there is a small lug here which gets in the way, and you don't need it. So what I do with that one is just break it off with a pair of pliers. Like that. Then remember, the plastic insulation piece goes on there. And just feed the potentiometer through the box. Like that. And then before you lock it up, just put the washer on there like that, and put the switch on, or the knob on there, and just see when it's in its off position that it's lined up, and then you know where to lock up the nut. So it's all back together again, switch is in the right position, and I've just checked all the wires inside to see that there's nothing out of place or touching. Incidentally, when you buy these from Amadeal as well, there's either 7mm thread ones or 10mm thread. And they ask you to specify which one you want. I forgot to do that, and I got a 7mm one, but it still fits perfectly in the actual housing. So now I'm putting the box back on again. I've only got one screw holding this plastic piece in here. It makes it easier to get the plugs back on. And the green one goes onto its terminal. You just have to study it just to see which way it goes round. It's quite straightforward. That one clicks onto the terminal, and then the digital display plug goes on, and that can only go on one way. And then the dark blue emergency stop button to the top, and the lighter blue one down below. And that's it, ready to go back in. Tuck the wires back in and just carefully see that they're not pinched anywhere, and put it back up on the lathe. And I found the easiest way to get it on first is to put the screw in the underside one first, nearest the chuck, and hold that in with the Phillips screwdriver and just line that up like that. Just checking that it's clear there, that's alright. Then leave that one a little bit loose and put the top one in. Few turns, and then the one this side, and tighten those up. So basically, to hold the box on there, I only have the 3 screws. I don't bother with the one right at the back on the underside. And you can take the gear guard off just to check that the wires look alright down at the back there, and then you're ready to give the lathe a test. And that looks good. And now I'll just show you what I mean about the switch being a safety device. If you had the spindle going like that and you thought you could just turn the direction to reverse, it wouldn't work. You'd first have to turn the switch off, which makes contact at the back of the switch like I show, and resets the electric circuit board, and then it'll go. And that's the correct operation for the Amadiel lathe. And to finish the job off completely, I get some electrical tape which is the same colour as my machine, and then I cover up all the gaps around the chuck area, and that will stop any swarf from getting into the machine, into the electrical box. I cover up all around this lead screw hole here and along the top here, and I have found that when I do that I don't get any swarf at all in the electrical box, so it's really worth doing that. And when all the gaps are nicely taped up, I put my polycarbonate cover back over the digital display. So I hope you enjoyed the video and see that you can actually repair your own lathe if you're careful, and you can change to a switch method on here if you prefer it, but I do like to keep my lathe standard and keep them working how I bought them. So I do think it's best to buy the Amadil potentiometer. And just before I go, I'd just like to say that you can actually download all the instructions for the K.B Electronics Circuit Board for the lathe off the internet. And with that you get the general connection diagram. You can see the potentiometer on there with the P1, P2 and P3 connections. Plus it gives you all the settings for the trim pots on the circuit board, and make sure that you keep it within the factory settings for your machine. And if you ever buy a second-hand Chinese Mini Lathe with the K.B Electronic DC motor speed control board, you can actually use that information to check that all the trim pots are in their correct setting. It gives you very clear instructions on that, and keeps the lathe running how it should, but also protects this circuit board or the motor from overload.